Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. For over 150 years, ours has been a church of open minds and loving hearts, celebrating many sources of wisdom, many spiritual paths, and many identities. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, and your hopes are welcome here. I am here in our sanctuary knowing that we are connected through time and space, that this space, though physically distant, is filled with your love and your spirit. So I'm here for you to bring you back into this space until we can be together again. Our doors are closed because our hearts are open. We're living our values of care and compassion. Today we celebrate what would be our regular end of the year, our regular end of the program year with the annual ritual of the Flower Communion. We've gathered flowers here in the sanctuary that people drove up and put in pitchers outside our church, and we'll also have pictures at the end of the service of those who sent in pictures of flowers from their home to celebrate our communal bouquet for this Flower Communion. It would also be our annual meeting usually, but instead look for a special email in these next few days, including an update from our board president, Gail Bishop, as well as myself. And then there'll also be a list of celebrations, anniversaries, graduations, and other milestones to celebrate in the life of the congregation. And coming soon will also be a final compilation of annual reports. So that'll all be coming in e-news, so you can keep in touch with what's happening with the church. As always, stay up to date through that and also contact any staff or leaders of the church if we can be helpful in any way for spiritual, emotional, material support for yourself or someone you know. Our church and our hearts are open, so please reach out. And a hearty congratulations to Connie Schulke, who has been named as Musician Emerita of First Unitarian Universalist Church upon her retirement at the end of June. We will celebrate with a service on Sunday, June 21st. Our online service will feature some of her favorite music, whatever she wants to play. And we'll celebrate again when we can gather in person in the future. But for now, we want to mark this special occasion and offer her a hearty congratulations and also deep gratitude. Thank you, Connie, for over 30 years of musical service to the church. And finally, today we have a special offering. Beginning today, we will collect each Sunday to support people within and beyond our church. Twice a month, the full collection, 100%, will go to some justice organization, and the other weeks it'll be split between supporting our church's mission and supporting people through financial assistance through our Human Needs Fund. Today, we will be collecting for Black Visions Collective, an organization that's on the ground in Minneapolis supporting Black leadership, empowerment, and organizing. So we invite you to give generously at the link provided, uurochmn.org/give. It will be listed throughout the service, or you can find it at our website as well. If you have resources and are not sure how to support Black communities right now with the uprising in Minneapolis that has echoed across the world, this is an amazing organization, and there'll be other opportunities in the coming weeks to support that work. Donating money is critically needed right now. You can give at that website link or contact the church if you have any questions. And finally, today, in the words of the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, minister of this church in the 1870s, as we end our regular year, but we do not close and continue into the summer, she leaves us with these words: "May our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together."
This is the Unitarian Universalist Church.
This is the Church of the Flaming Chalice.
This is the Church of the Open Mind.
This is the Church of the Loving Heart,
where friends come together and share.
As a child of the 50s, the first days of June always translated into freedom. My school uniform had been washed and put away. Off came my white anklets and scuffed Mary Janes, which I traded for bare feet. It was always a shock making that first barefoot trek down the alley to play with my friends, not quite understanding why it hurt. My mind knew I had walked that way countless times the previous summer without such discomfort. I couldn't quite make the correlation between those sharp ouches and the long school months when my feet had been protected. It would take weeks of shoeless bike riding, playing sidewalk hopscotch, and running through neighbors' yards catching evening fireflies before the calluses would make the cinders in the alley only a slight nuisance. While I no longer go barefoot in the alley, I still revel in the wonder of June. As worship associate, I often volunteer for this Sunday just so I can actively participate in our flower communion. When I bring you a flower and you share a flower with me, even if this year it's only virtually. One of my favorite readings is by the Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern, written in the style of litany, an ancient meditative format that often flows like breathing. Each stanza of her flower blessing is followed by the responsive petition, "May our lives bloom like flowers." But writing this call to worship has been a creative challenge amidst jumbled thoughts. The constant swirl of COVID-19-induced emotions that we are all experiencing, mixed with my sense of joy to be celebrating the flower communion together. All the while knowing that as we celebrate life by sharing the beauty of nature, there is the horror that another unarmed Black man was the victim of such brutality so as to cause his death. A poignant photo from last week's protest showed a group of religious leaders outside the White House. One individual held a written poster listing the names of 12 African Americans whose lives were cut short by racial prejudice and hatred. And even more alarming is that I realized the list was grossly incomplete. On those long ago summer days, my calluses were a good thing, but I worry that with each senseless death, we form mental calluses that desensitize our reactions, reduce our outrage, and lessen our compassion. A web post by Father Patrick St. Jean, a Black Jesuit in America, written after George Floyd's suffocation, was so eloquent that no mental calluses formed in my mind. He wrote, "Being Black in America should not mean we walk in fear of death, but it does. It should not mean that we have less access to breath, but it does. Blacks are constantly begging for oxygen, a gift that God granted everyone. Centuries of systematic racism, such as redlining and gerrymandering, have rendered a long litany of resources unavailable to the Black community. Air should not be on the list. It is hard for Black people to have to ask for their humanity to be recognized while also asking for breath." Last Sunday, Reverend Luke asked, how are we using the breath that we still have to act, to vote, to sing, to find the beauty that is worth fighting for, worth working for, on this tangled path of a world, this tangled mess of a soul, filled with this back and forth, this switch-backed soul between beauty and brokenness. His phrase, switch-backed soul between beauty and brokenness, perfectly describes my jumbled thoughts. As we celebrate the beauty of our flower communion, and I hand my flower to you, I return to Father Paul's words, the Black Jesuit Litany. Crying out for an America where we can trust the police, we are asking for breath. Crying out for an America where our right to life matters, we are asking for breath. Crying out for an America where we can be seen and heard, we are asking for breath. Crying out for an America where we can enjoy the same privileges of breath, we are asking for breath.
A lamp in every corner. A tale of our sixth principle. We should build a fair and peaceful world. Many years ago, in the land of Transylvania, in a valley watered by rushing streams, lived a group of people of the Unitarian religion. Their small village wanted a church of their own. All of the people of the village labored long and hard to build themselves a church. The stonemasons chiseled great blocks. The glaziers made glass panes and fitted them into windows with lead lines. Carpenters carved wood for doors and pews. The people of the village worked together to make their church warm, colorful, and inviting. Finally, when the church building was done, all of the people of the village stood back to admire it, and then to sing a song of happiness and praise. Their village had a church now, a church set on the hillside, looking down upon the village. "We will eat now," announced an elder of the village, because everyone was hungry after their long days of work. "And later tonight, we will come back to pray and celebrate." So the people of the village went down the hillside to their homes and their suppers, all except one little girl and her father, who stayed behind. They had brought their own dinner. They ate slowly, sitting on the grass on the hillside, admiring their new church with its strong stone walls. After they had eaten, they went back inside, opening those carved wooden doors to go into the glorious sanctuary. "Oh, look, Father," she said, running from picture to picture with her footsteps echoing. "See how pretty the church is? See how grand?" "Yes, it is," said her father, nodding with pride. "But, Father," the young girl said, "we have not finished." "What do you mean?" "There are iron lampstands all along the wall, but there are no lamps. The church will be dark when the people come back." "Oh, no, little one. Watch and you will see. The light inside the church come from the people." The little girl and her father looked over the hillside and saw specks of light coming closer and closer. "Each family is entrusted with their own lamp, little one." Where is our family lamp? Your mother is bringing it. She will be here soon. Once her mother arrived, she was able to lift the family's lamp high onto the tall iron stand. All around the church, other families were doing the same. Soon the church was ablaze with light in every corner, for all the people of the village had gathered there to pray and to sing. All throughout the worship service, they watched the lights flicker and glow. When the service was over, her father lifted her high. She took the shining lamp from the lampstand. Her mother carried the lamp home with the flame lighting the way. The lamp flame lit their house when they returned. "Mother?" she asked. "Yes, little one?" "Father said the light of the church comes from its people." "Yes," said her mother, "but also the people take their light from the church, and we have that light every day." "Yes, indeed," said her mother. "And even when we're not in church, even when the lamp is not lit, we carry the light of truth in our minds and flame of love in our hearts to show us the right way. That light, the light from truth and love, will never go out." "Never?" "Never," said her mother. And always the light of truth and the flame of love from that Unitarian church on the hillside continues to grow and show them and us the way. So even though we all can't be together right now, in church or in the sanctuary, even outside around the maypole or in the courtyard, we all carry our lights with us every day. And when we come back to the congregation and can be all together again, we'll bring those lights right back and pick up where we left off.
I invite you to take a deep breath, find your breath, center down, breathe deep the breath of life, and remember how precious that is right now. Feel below you the earth and its ancient turning. Feel above you the stars and their ancient light, holding you here, now, alive. Know that here you are named and you are known as beloved, as sacred. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by taking some slow, silent breaths together. Spirit of life and source of love, God of 1,000 names and beyond all naming, we join in the prayer of Warson Shire, who wrote, "I've been praying, and these are what my prayers look like. Dear God, I come from 2 countries. One is thirsty and the other is on fire. Both need water. Later that night, I held an atlas in my lap, ran my fingers across the whole world, and whispered, 'Where does it hurt?' It answered, 'Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.' With the world on fire, many sheltering in place for too many reasons, the hurt and the pain are real. The need for reparations and restoration are real. And we have work to do. Spirit of life, which lives and breathes in the ways we hold each other, in the ways we care for each other, in the ways we call out in rage and in grief for things to change, in the ways that we use our resources, our voices, our money, our words, our deeds, help us to remember the call of this liberal faith, to name each life as sacred, especially those who the world has over and over cast aside to proclaim that Black lives matter and George Floyd's life mattered. And we are all now in the clutches of systems of oppression, needing to find how we can breathe. May we help give life the shape of justice. May we be held by roots and witness of ancestors who have made a way out of no way. May we take the breath we have and the voice and the place we have to listen hard to the voices of the oppressed, people of color, indigenous people, Black people, to bring to the streets of Minneapolis and far beyond our tears, our humility, our solidarity, our commitment to a better world, longing to breathe free. We hold this day all who suffer in mind, in body, in spirit. These flowers pictured here, in addition to all these communal flowers on our chancel today. These flowers are shared in love for Erica Fetterman, our staff member, and her family in memory of her beloved son, Logan. I invite you to bring the names that you are holding this day in joy or in sorrow, celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all those names and many others, may we all be held in justice and in love. These words of meditation come from Ellen Bass. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than for lungs. When grief weights you down like your own flesh, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. May it be so, and amen.
The first reading is No Hothouse Flowers by Lisa Day. No hothouse flowers these, bred for perfection, dyed and trimmed and arranged to order, clothed in ribbons and bows. Not these. No, these are hardy, raw, and wild. Grown under the sky, they've weathered the wind and the rain and the heat. They drew nutrients from the neighborhood soil and energy from the sun. These survive pests and disease. These grow where they were planted by loving hands or the whim of birds or the caprice of the breeze. These have petals washed by dew, glowing with the colors of the hills, the seas, the prairies, and the rocks. Their delicate perfume carries in it the fragrance of earth. No, not perfect these, only holy, a blessing to the eye and heart and soul. The second reading is from Inheriting Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. How was the creativity kept alive year after year, century after century, when for most of the years Black people have been in America, it was a punishable crime for a Black person to read, to write, and for the freedom to paint, to sculpt, to expand the mind with action did not exist. Consider, if you can bear to imagine it, what might have been the result if singing, too, were forbidden by law. Listen to the voices of Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Roberta Flack, and Aretha Franklin, among others, and imagine those voices muzzled for life. The agony of the lives of women who might have been poets, novelists, essayists, and short story writers who died with their real gifts stifled within them. We must fearlessly pull out of ourselves and look at and identify with our lives the living creativity some of our great-grandmothers were not allowed to know. Some because the majority of our grandmothers knew, even without knowing it, the reality of their spirituality. And so our mothers and grandmothers have, more often than not anonymously, handed on the creative spark, the seed of the flower they themselves never hoped to see. My mother adorned with flowers whatever shabby house we were forced to live in. She planted ambitious gardens with over 50 different varieties of plants that bloomed profusely. Because of her creativity of flowers, even my memories of poverty are seen through a screen of blooms. Sunflowers, petunias, roses, dahlias, and on, ordering the universe in the image of her personal conception of beauty. Guided by my heritage of a love of beauty and a respect for strength, in search of my mother's garden, I found my own.
There are irises in our yard now, and the odd thing is we didn't know that, nor did we plant them. We had never seen them before, and this year, for the first time, we found these tall, beautiful grasses springing up where we didn't remember and couldn't quite identify them until just this past week or two, and apparently they've been there for quite some time. The thing is, and you gardeners know this well, and my daughters are quickly surpassing my knowledge of the natural world with all this time in the yard, that the reason it had not bloomed for at least the past 3 years while we've been there, or showed up, is that it was taken over, smothered by a knotweed, an invasive, hardy, strong, persistent weed that had taken over quite a lot of things that we didn't know had been there before. So we figured out finally the knotweed at the end of last year, this long established part of our yard that had a bit of beauty at times, it seemed, but took up so much space that there was no room for others to take root, to blossom, to grow, to breathe. How was the creativity kept alive? Wrote Alice Walker. Year to year, century to century, these black women with gifts stifled within them. Imagine, she writes, if you can bear to imagine it, their voices muzzled for life. Just up the road from here has been an epicenter of an uprising. A city on fire, communities in grief, as the world reeled in continued reminders that the beauty of Black lives was again, as always, but so publicly this week, under attack, its life cut down. It's not a new story, of course, we know that. It's over 400 years of consistent and persistent systems, patterns of oppression, by those with power, those with force, who are protected by a culture that likes to paint the actions of some as not the norm or uncommon, but history tells a different story of a systemic, violent culture of policing that can sway even the best-intentioned officers sometimes, unknowingly, in how departments police Black and brown neighborhoods. We know this through writing, through documentation, and most powerfully through story of Black people and communities and people of color and indigenous people, what they've endured for generations. This week has also been a ridiculous and reckless display of empire, of a president standing in front of a church he does not frequent, holding a book he clearly does not understand, after tear gassing the priests and the peaceful protesters off the steps of their church, calling for violence and force across this nation. That is a display of violent empire, called out by the bishop of that very church, and it's nothing short of evil. It has been a week of reports and videos of escalation by both police and white nationalists infiltrating protests, and then a response like a totalitarian police state. Complicated, yes, but clearly not rooted in de-escalation and peacekeeping. The response and rhetoric has been rooted in a show of dominant force by far too many leaders. One of our national leaders for justice work in our tradition, who lives in Minneapolis, the Reverend Ashley Horan, who's preached in our church and will this summer again, reminds us not to water down this faith of ours into some wishy-washy universalism that pretends all perspectives are equal. Our values call us to lift up the voices of the oppressed and those on the margins, whose very identities are under threat. And while nonviolence, of course, is always our hope, justice is always at its core. It has to be. Like a long-established invasive weed, white supremacy, police brutality, systematic and systemic racism have overtaken so much of the beauty and possibility in this country for so long. The world has been on fire for a long time, and there's no easy way to quench it. This country founded on land that was looted. And yet, this week, we have been witness to beauty breaking through the most unlikely places. From every little street corner, little lamps of love that bring light in these dark nights. It's like a screen of blooms, even in the midst of hardship, as Alice Walker wrote. There have been flowers laid at an altar of remembrance in the middle of the street in Minneapolis, surrounding death with beauty, like in this picture by Carlos Montenegro. These flowers, writes Lisa Day, are hardy and wild and raw, have weathered rain and heat. Flowers are showing up here, right there on the street, to adorn the broken street right in the middle of the pavement. And while focus of many authorities have turned to property protection and forcing out unrest with a militarized Minneapolis, communities have turned to each other across this country, sheltering each other like in their homes. One group of protesters sheltered in some stranger's home when they were surrounded by police. People have turned to each other to keep watch over each other's homes and businesses overnight, providing safety and shelter when law enforcement was somewhere else. And for the first time in a long, long time, there is actual conversation from the city council in Minneapolis as the police department is about to undergo serious civil rights investigations about dismantling the department that has long wreaked havoc on Black communities. They've begun to imagine something different because it's not working. They've begun to imagine what community-led and community-based policing and safety might look like. This could be an uprising for transformation, a moment of power, building blocks for what the Reverend Dr. King called the beloved community, or as what our tradition has always called universal salvation or heaven on earth. It will take a lot of work and a lot of luck and a lot of support, strategic support, especially from those that have privilege and power. While the destruction has been severe, the breaking open that is happening has felt necessary, because I believe there is beauty still in the midst of it, and power. There has always been. Beauty and brokenness are not an either-or game. They're switchbacked, as Anne mentioned again this morning. They are intertwined always. And the work, like the knotweed in our yard, is to attend to it, to the systems that choke out life with intention and commitment. It takes vigilance, cutting away at it over and over again, every day, little snips here and there, little by little, year after year, generation to generation, cutting it back, cutting it down with how we use our resources or how we tell stories, what narratives we push, whether we unintentionally perpetuate protections of those with power and force, giving them too many outs, or we uplift communities of color and black leadership so that the other long-established beauty doesn't become smothered. Because out of the ashes, it is true, over and over, people rise. There is no level playing field here. Ours is a faith that sides with love and justice is always on the side of the oppressed and the marginalized, because we believe that is for our collective well-being, for everybody. It calls us to disrupt the status quo and our own comfort internally and our own intentional or even unconscious complicity. So what to do with all of this going on? There are no easy answers, but there are many things. You can educate yourself. We'll provide some resources over the summer, a great reading list, and other opportunities to learn about the history of policing and liberation. You can listen to Black leadership calling for change. You can put your resources where your values are, like in today's offering for the Black Visions Collective. You can question yourself. Question yourself when maybe you're leaning toward order instead of justice, instead of a reconstructed, rebuilt, beloved community. This work is hard, and it is messy to imagine. It's unclear exactly what to do. I have nowhere near the answers I wish I and many others could have. But that is what this tradition always calls of us, to enter the messiness, to pour our heart and our hopes into wisdom from many sources, including right in the midst of the weeds, right there in the middle of the pavement, the sacred stories that are being told, that they are holy, heart-wrenching, yes, but also heart-healing. And I know and have seen hearts transformed, souls lifted up, grateful to do the hard work, to be invited into it, the work of reparations and restoration for a more just world, as hard as it is. I believe and I have seen irises rising up right through the weeds when there is care by those tending to that garden. Flowers and beauty rise up all the time, right in the midst of hardship, of oppression. They rise up with strength and resilience and community and love. And if we do the work of dismantling white supremacy and privilege in our institutions, in our communities, in our own hearts, little by little, day by day, figuring it out, holding ourselves and each other accountable, and also doing the work and holding ourselves with forgiveness and grace and courage, that we will not know exactly what to do all the time, and that's okay. By doing that, we help cut back the invasive weeds of oppression and give enough space, enough air for beauty to bloom and to breathe. Let's use our breath here let's use the air we've got to plant some seeds that are powerful enough to come up through the weeds and through the streets. So I invite you, as you know the words, to sing with me or hum with me in voice or in spirit. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Amen. The flower communion is a Unitarian ritual that was created at the beginning of June 1923 by the Reverend Norbert Čapek in Prague, Czechoslovakia, for his congregation of almost 3,000 Unitarians. Čapek, who had been raised a Catholic and ordained as a Baptist before becoming a Unitarian, kind of like several of us, sought all his life to live as if his soul were free, as if spiritual freedom were as urgent a human need as intellectual or social or political freedom. He was accused of heresy and subversion. He was tried for treason twice by the Nazis. And in each case, the major evidence against him was taken from his own sermons. His own words from Sunday services were read against him, and in 1942, he was deported to the concentration camp at Dachau, where he died. In 1940, the Reverend Maya Čapek, Norbert's wife, came to the United States and brought the flower communion to the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which spread like wildflowers among our Unitarian and Universalist congregations. The flower communion from its beginning was very simple. People were asked, each to bring a flower from their own gardens or from the roadside or pasture on the last Sunday before the summer. When they arrived at church, a large vase stood waiting to receive their flowers. Offering these flowers signified that it was by their own free will that they joined this community, bringing whatever gifts they could. We have gathered your flowers this week in pitchers and pictures for our altar, this communal bouquet. These flowers are for all of us to find through this time where beauty still blooms, and though our gifts, our flowers, may seem small to us, they add to the larger world of hope and possibility, so that we keep our mission alive, each of us nurturing spirituality, practicing justice and compassion.
If you have taught or volunteered in religious education and faith development classes, helped in the nursery, and if you have learned wisdom from our church's children, these flowers are for you.
If you have helped clean, shovel, rake, pull weeds, plant flowers, if you've run the sound system or moved chairs, if you have watered plants or cared for our building or grounds, this flower is for you.
You've provided a meal or a ride, helped usher or make coffee. If you've shared food or participated in or led a chalice circle, group, or class, and if you've received or offered a generous, glad welcome, this flower is for you.
If you have supported our youth by sharing time or resources, participating in our classes or events, learning from their voices, this flower is for you.
If you have added to the beauty of this church by donating flowers or decorating for events or receptions, if you have donated to the church or the wider community for a more just and loving world, this flower is for you.
If you have sung in the choir, provided music for services or events, sung your heart out in the sanctuary or during our services at home, or if you found yourself moved by the music at our church, these flowers are for you.
If you love this church, or at least are willing to give it a try, if you have found ways to nurture your soul or act for justice, if you have hope in your heart that there is still goodness alive in this world, and even when, and especially when, you're not sure about it, that you know you can count on these people, this community and others, to offer some word of hope, and for everyone else. This flower is for you. It's for our shared life together. May you know this beauty holds you. Reverend Chapek wrote this: "This service emphasizes our liberty, but also our common cause. Here in this spiritual community, by choice, we are kindred, and when we go home, each of us takes a flower just as it came, without making any distinction where it came from, who it represents, to confess that we accept one another as kindred, without regard to class or race or other distinction, acknowledging everybody as our friend who is human and wants to do and be good. Even though one may be disappointed 1,000 times or fallen in the fight and everything would worthless seem," he said, "be grateful, my soul, for in this life I have lived amidst eternity." Here, friends, amidst eternity, we gather and we share the beauty that we are. We hope for and work for the beauty that is yet to be and to breathe and come into being. And even if it is for a few brief moments, we will, in this world of color and vibrant beauty, breathe with gratitude. May the beauty we bring to this altar of life right there, right here on the streets in Minneapolis and everywhere. Circle around our pain and circle around our rage and our tears. May it circle around for all of us imprisoned. May it circle for beauty and release, justice and love. Amen. I invite you to take a deep breath. I invite you to hold the beauty that you have created here and in the pictures you'll see after this service. Know that we need every seemingly shabby flower to be laid there on the street to make every humble place holy, and to believe that and work for it. And sing with me again. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Amen.
together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of Voices 3. This is the sound of Voices 3. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, we don't turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound